Welcome to Viget Visit SILS. My name is Lori Haight, and I serve as the Career Services Coordinator at the School of Information and Library Science. And I'm thrilled to welcome back one of our favorite UX places, Viget. And I am actually going to turn it over to our Viget guests to introduce themselves and get the program started.
All right. Thanks, Lori. So hi, SILS. So yes, we will introduce ourselves, but this is what we're going to cover today. So we want to give you kind of a sense about who we are and some of the types of work that we do, what types of opportunities are available at Viget for library and information science folks and others. And first, let's introduce ourselves. And I kind of left off Margaret, so I'm sorry, Margaret. But I can start here. I'm Curt Arledge. I'm a senior UX designer at Viget. I went to UNC for undergraduate, and I got degrees in political science and history, which I do nothing with now. And then I came back to SILS for graduate school and got a master's in information science. And while I was working on that degree, I got an internship over the summer at Viget, and then got a full-time job. I've been working there for 7 years since. So I bounced between Durham and the DC area, where our main headquarters is based. And now, most recently, I moved down to Chattanooga to help open a new office for Viget down there. Jackson?
Hey, I'm Jackson Fox. Let's see. I am the head of UX at Viget, and I graduated from SILS with a Master's in Information and Library Science in 2005, and actually was in the PhD program for a little bit before realizing that really wasn't my jam. But learned a lot and took a lot of that with me into the field, and I've been working at Viget off and on for about 12 years. Including a stint in our Durham, North Carolina office right after graduating from SILS, but now I'm based in Boulder, Colorado. And then I want to introduce Margaret, who is one of our recruiters at Viget, to say hi.
Hi, yes, thanks, Jackson. I am a recruiter at Viget. I think the main focus today will be Curt and Jackson talking about some of their work, but wanted to be here as well. I work pretty closely with our internship and apprenticeship recruiting, and so can answer questions about those as well, but just excited to be here and glad you all are interested and want to hear.
Cool, thanks, Margaret. All right, Viget is a digital innovation agency.
Curt, we lost your audio.
Well, Jackson, do you want to talk through these slides while I figure out my mic situation?
Sure thing.
Have to.
That's okay. I don't mind. Like as Curt said, we're a digital innovation agency. We are a team of designers, engineers, strategists, as it says. We actually work across a number of different fields, though. I think one of the really interesting things about Viget is, as an agency, we are as deep on the engineering side as we are on design. And even in design, we do a wide range of things. Curt has a slide in here that a little bit later we can talk a little about kinds of clients that we work with. But one of the great things about the experience that I've had at Viget is we get to work across brand-focused work in different campaigns, marketing sites, organizational sites, but we also work in digital products and everything in between. That might be things like e-commerce, complex content sites, and things that kind of blend a little bit of each of those things. So it gives a nice variety of experience, and we put a lot of different services towards that. Curt, if you want to jump over to that services slide.
Is this the slide?
That is the one I was thinking of. So I think it just kind of reflects the variety of different things that we do. And we put a lot of different teams to work doing that. So Curt and I sit in the UX team. That team is doing things like research and strategy, product design, content strategy, information architecture, navigation across all of these different kinds of projects. We work with product designers, UX researchers. We also have creative team that manages a lot of the kind of brand side of this work, creating brand, thinking about messaging, thinking about brand forward design. We also have technical teams, front-end development, back-end development, data and analytics, data engineering, each one of those things working together to bring all of those different projects to life. And that is, of course, supported by teams like our project managers, product managers, and our operations team to make sure all of these projects are happening successfully.
I can jump back in, Jackson.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to share some of the kind of neat projects that we've worked on in the past few years. So we work in creating software, so we can create anything that you can imagine, which is awesome. Software is great. We worked on the Puppy Bowl for with Animal Planet for during the Super Bowl. We work on these cool interactive experiences for retail, like Dick's Sporting Goods, that include things like incorporate video into interactive experiences. This was a project for the Bronx Zoo where we got to go to the zoo for several days and help create an interactive map that helped people get around the zoo and know things like whether certain restaurants are open or closed, and when the monkey show is, or things like that. We work with a lot of nonprofits and have created experiences like this where we bring awareness to a cause, or in this case, a rare disease, and create these interactive user flows where we make a quiz kind of a fun thing to do in a browser. We also kind of do some editorial work sometimes. So this was a single page kind of scroll-based experience for ESPN that tracked LeBron James and his kind of scoring record among all these other scores, and really used the vertical orientation to kind of track that quantity over time, and talked about all the other players that he had surpassed along the way, and included a lot of really cool design. Culturally, sharing is a big part of Viget, and we've got plenty of time for professional development and pursuing side projects and hobbies. There are a lot of rituals involved at Viget. There's free lunch every Friday, and there are, where we get all of our offices together on a video call and cover all of the project updates and sales leads and deep dives into certain projects and deep dives into certain topics. That also includes something called Lab Share, which is one person in the company every Friday gives a 10-minute presentation about any subject of their choice at all, not necessarily even work related. So we've had some really interesting and enlightening lab shares over the years, but a lot of people at Viget describe the culture as a family, which is accurate. We also go on biannual kind of retreats as a company and kind of reflect on the work that we've done. We have a motto that is progress, not perfection. And we're always trying to kind of reflect on our processes and tweak things and share successes and reckon with failures. Not that we ever fail at anything, but also this is a shot from our 15th anniversary retreat to the mountains of Colorado, when we rented a kind of luxury ranch for a weekend, and we are headed back that way. We had to cancel it last year for the 20th anniversary, but it is happening this year. And then we also participate a lot in the community, whether that's through blog writing. We have a pretty highly trafficked and well-known blog that is kind of runs the gamut of design and development and culture and process. And then we also incentivize employees to go speak and to share both internally and externally. And we've got great offices. So we do more and more are accepting of remote workers, especially during the pandemic. And of course, we've all been remote for the past year, but we've put a lot of kind of love into the offices that we have. And those are great kind of gathering places where there's plenty of room to kind of go off on your own and get a quiet space, or to be more social, and lots of good culture at each of our offices, which are kind of flip through that quickly, but in the DC metro area, in Falls Church, Virginia, they're in Durham, one in Boulder, Colorado, and the newest one out in Chattanooga, Tennessee. A few words about project process, specifically as it relates to design, but also want to touch on some of the other roles that I think a SILS graduate would be well suited for. You know, we do work for clients and produce design solutions and software for clients. And one of the kind of models that underlies a design process is this common kind of double diamond approach, where at first we're trying to understand a client and their needs, and we're trying to, you know, we're doing things like, you know, user interviews and stakeholder interviews. If we can, contextual inquiry, getting out into the field and observing people. Usability testing, competitive analysis. Then we go through to define that strategy of what are we doing and what are we going to do for this client and what are we going to produce. We'll go through things like content strategy. We'll hold workshops with the client, product strategy, if applicable, to talk about what does this thing do and what are the priorities of different features. Information architecture is something that we do a lot, that I kind of learned a lot about at SILS, in terms of how do we organize things for ease of findability, and how do we label things, and how do we structure information spaces broadly. And then executing a solution, you know, we're employing methods like sketching and wireframing and putting together prototypes and brainstorming, trying to think of as many different possible solutions as we can. And then the creation phase really is it's all about, you know, designing the UI for production, defining features, and working with developers to get stuff built. Jackson, I'm going to hand it off to you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And talk through some of our approach to 3 different roles, which are user experience, product or project management, and data analysts.
Sure thing. So these are some of the roles I kind of touched on earlier, but probably the ones that are most applicable to people who are going through SILS. So the user experience team, again, that's Curt and I. We are UX designers at Viget. The UX team also includes product designers as well as UX researchers. Across all 3 of those roles, we have a strong interest in research and testing. We feel like talking to users is kind of the pillar of good UX design, human-centered design, user-centered design. Talking to people that helps you design things better. So that means that we are focused on doing interviews, running surveys, doing usability testing, and then analyzing and deriving strategy out of that research work. Making sense of things is a key role and a key task for our user experience designers. This is things like information architecture, figuring out the content that we need, the structure of that content, whether that's for a content management system or just what is it you need on each page, how is it organized on the page, how is it prioritized on the page, and then thinking about organizing, searching, labeling, how do you organize information and data within a site, and how do you make it accessible to users through search, browse, and navigation. And then validating those decisions. And then design. Within at Viget in particular, we have like I said, a number of different design roles, and each one of those tends to approach design in a little bit different way. Within the UX team, we're very much focused on thinking about the best way to present information and functionality to users. So a very kind of pragmatic approach to design. So we're thinking about form design, we're thinking about screen design, whether mobile or desktop, and doing that in a usable and useful way, you know, presenting features to people that will help them get work done. We also have a creative team that takes this from a more brand-centric approach. So if we're trying to persuade someone, sell something, or generally kind of expose the messaging for an organization, that team is thinking about that from a brand-centered, message-centered. So kind of no matter what your passion is for design, there's a lot of different roles under that design umbrella, and you can kind of find your own way through that. The next one is project management. So project managers make sure that projects get done successfully. They are kind of the lead consultants on many of our projects. They are interfacing with clients. They are working through project planning, making sure that we are doing the right thing and collaborating with project team members like UX designers to make sure that we're putting together an effective plan, targeting the right deliverables, making sure that clients are coming along for the ride. A lot of what we're doing is good client communication, and project managers are here to make sure that that's happening, to facilitate that communication and make sure that clients understand what we're trying to do and how we're making progress. Understanding stakeholders, trying to understand what they need and how we communicate to them, and then using tools like Slack and Basecamp for communication and organization and making sure all this is happening effectively and efficiently, and yeah, on budget-ish. And then the third one we have in here is data and analytics team. So as a UX designer, I collaborate very closely with our data analysts. Our data analysts are doing things like helping us define goals for a project and the KPIs that we'll use to measure them. We want to be able to use data both to inform design, but also to track success. So when we are early on in the project, we're often collaborating together from a qualitative research as well as quantitative research perspective, merging those two things together to get a perspective on how does this site work today and how can we improve it in whatever goals the client has. So again, against the measurement strategy, KPIs that will go into that, as well as implementation of tracking and data and analytics so we can actually track all this accurately. There's a lot of nuance that goes into getting good data out of a site, and it's nice to be working closely with effective data analysts who understand that nuance. And then we're working together on analysis, again, looking at data, both quantitative and qualitative, to understand how sites are working, sharing that data back to the client and using that to inform design decisions as well as development decisions. In terms of tools, we're mostly focused on Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, but there's a number of other tools that we use alongside that. Both for tracking behavioral, kind of how people use websites, as well as doing the analysis, whether that's as simple as Google Sheets or more complex analysis and things like Python, Tableau, and other tools.
So before we open this up to Q&A, I wanted to talk about one specific project that was fun that I did recently, and talk you through specifically a user journey map deliverable that came out of that. So the client that we worked with was the NFL Players Association. And this is, it's not the NFL, it's the union that represents the players in the league. So in many ways, it's kind of an antagonist to the NFL and making sure that players are not being kind of taken advantage of by their owners and teams. So we applied about every service that Viget has on this project. It was a full website redesign. So we did a discovery and user research phase. We created a new brand strategy for the NFLPA. We did information architecture and visual design. We developed a content strategy for them, and we developed the new site. And the site, nflpa.com, is kind of a mix of two different types of sites. One is a fairly traditional content site on a content management system with a hierarchy of pages and blog posts and things like that. On the other hand, there's this kind of a part of this that was more like a portal or an intranet where users can log in, they can manage a complex profile, they can access their benefits, they can download sensitive documents and things like that. So as a UX designer, I kind of straddled both of these different lenses of the site. So I was working with brand strategists and visual designers and content strategists on one side. And on the other side, I was working with developers to kind of define and prioritize different features. So one of the things that was really important to do at the beginning to understand, how this new site could best serve NFL players was to map their career journeys. So this is an organization that really follows them from, when they first enter the NFL to literally when they die. This is a part of their lives that provides certain services to them. So one of the things that we knew early on is that we probably wanted to produce some type of artifact that was based on a timeline that kind of guided us, at important situations in a player's life. So we did research involved in kind of mining for these situations that can happen to active players, former players, prospective players. So we held workshops with the NFLPA in DC. We talked to a lot of their staff and the people who work directly with NFL players. We interviewed 10 or 20 NFL players themselves. No one too famous, but definitely everyone in the league is incredibly talented and made time for us, which was really gratifying. And I should say, with all this, I'm not even a sports fan. And I was in this situation where I had to interview professional athletes and professional agents, and this whole milieu was like way out of my comfort zone. But I was confident in our ability to, have the time we needed to do the research we needed, and the ability to kind of take an external, unbiased view on this domain. And it was really comfortable for me the whole time. So just examples of some of the user research questions that we asked players were, again, related to kind of learning more about the situations that occurred during their careers. So what's the most difficult or stressful situation you've been in related to your career, but off the field? Has there been a situation where the NFLPA has helped you or given you an opportunity that you wouldn't have otherwise had? Tell me about how you found your agent. Have you ever changed your agent? Have you ever fired an agent? How did you find a new one? Have you ever had an injury that kept you off the field for an extended period of time? What went through your head? How did you know what to do next? And how did you figure that out? In a lot of cases, the information that these players need is on this website, but they don't know to look for it, and they don't know how to look for it. So a lot of this was kind of trying to get in their mental models for different information needs. So the next step was creating a visual to process all of the data we collected from these interviews. And this iterated from whiteboard sketches into kind of low fidelity diagramming tools. We realized very quickly that this was quite complicated and really not all that linear. We looked to some older data visualizations for inspiration. This is a classic one by someone named Charles Menard that visualized Napoleon's march to Moscow in the 19th century, and was inspiring because it pulls together like 7 different types of data in a single diagram. This was another one that I looked to that is the Union armies in the Civil War on a timeline from 1861 to 65. And it uses the thickness of lines to represent the size of these armies and show things like the battles that were fought and the separation and combination of different units. So what I eventually arrived at, and I know this is too large to see in any real detail, but was a diagram that was actually printed out at 8 feet long, a very large journey map, and really follows the entire kind of nonlinear progression of players in the NFL. So each section of this map is made up of touch points that players have with the league or with the union or with each other. It follows different kind of groups of players as they go from, say, college into being drafted into the NFL or into free agency. And it also kind of documents some of the emotional things that they're going through at these different touch points. And this was valuable to the NFLPA. And we presented this as kind of part of our discovery in the first month or two of the project. This was valuable to them because they didn't really have a single source of truth for this. And they certainly didn't have one in a single document. So this pulled together information that we got from across the organization for lots of different silos of people who interact with players in different and discrete ways, and put that all together on a single timeline. So they realize certain things about the player experience that they had not really noticed from their individual silos. And this also informed some of the changes and new designs that we made to the website, including a new dashboard that players see when they log in. And this was really based on what we had learned about the information that's most important to players at different stages of their career and in different situations. We also created kind of a system for notifications and for highlighting certain content based on what we knew about the player that was logged in. So Jackson, I don't know if you want to share a bit about HRC, or if we feel like we want to jump into questions. We're about at the halfway mark, but I feel like you all have heard plenty from us at this point.
Yes. I'm happy to talk through HRC later, but I think that we've talked enough for now. Happy to open it up to questions right now. And feel free to unmute and just ask, or feel free to use the chat if that is easier.
I have a few questions to start us off, but as Jackson said, everyone here has the ability to talk directly, or if we want to put it in the chat, that whichever you're more comfortable with. I love these presentations because I think Viget is a great organization, and how it weaves together so many distinct parts of what they learn at SILS, I think is fascinating to see in the practitioner role. So I'm going to ask a few questions that I hear from students who are considering starting a career in a UX role. And so you're going to be my resident experts tonight, that instead of me saying, I think, I'm going to say, oh, I've actually spoken and gotten this response. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask is if you can share your thoughts on portfolios, how important they might be in the interviewing process, what should be in them, how to arrange it, anything you'd like to share about portfolios.
Sure. They are, for better or worse, fairly important in the recruiting process. Is generally one of the very first things that we are looking at when we are evaluating candidates for any role that we have. We are looking at a portfolio. What we are looking for in that portfolio is process and examples of good critical problem solving skills. So I think one of the first mistakes that we see when people send us a portfolio is they think of a portfolio as a visual artifact. It is supposed to wow me with it being visually impressive. It should look cool. Honestly, it doesn't have to look cool. It has to tell me a good story. What we are really looking for are case studies. Tell me about the project you did. Tell me about the problem you were faced with. Tell me about the process you went to understand that problem, to create a solution for that problem. And especially as undergraduate or graduate students, tell me about your takeaways from that process. What we are looking for is evidence that you are learning the design process, that you are getting more familiar with it, that you're understanding kind of the ups and downs of that process, the challenges that you might face through it. One of the parts that I tend to love most is when I see a little reflection at the bottom of every project that says, here's what I learned from this project, or here's where I gained experience in doing this project. So yeah, I think those are the biggest things. I am not here to see big, gorgeous pictures of your design work. I don't not like that. But only after I've read the story. I'm going to read the story first, and then I'm going to look for all the pretty pictures. So tell me the story first, and if you need to stop there, that's fine. But I don't mind the pictures too.
Thank you. And to follow up on that, I had heard many years ago that for students who are just starting out, you don't necessarily have to limit your portfolio to things you were hired to do. Could it also be a project you've just like, oh, this is an irritation I see, this is a problem I'd like to solve. It doesn't have to be that you were hired to do it.
Exactly, we get it. You're brand new to this field. Your opportunities for doing this work for pay are limited, or else you wouldn't be new to the field. So we see people share their coursework projects, whether that was through a graduate program, through a boot camp, frequently going to be a starting point for your portfolio. We see personal projects or passion projects, whether that's something you volunteered for or something you did purely for your own edification and exploration. All of those are valuable if you can tell good stories around them. Personal projects can actually be incredibly valuable because they can allow you to focus your practice around areas that you want to gain experience with, things that, frankly, a paid client might not want to do or pay you for. So yeah, go ahead, make up a project, do it for fun, do it for passion, as long as it's telling a good story and you can kind of show how that project led you to improve your practice, it's going to be valuable to a hiring manager.
Yeah, I would say a little bit of extracurricular, side projects is almost a must for a design role like this as a SILS student. I mean, we're not hiring information scientists, we're hiring user experience designers, and those have a lot of overlap, but they're not completely one-to-one. So when I was in school at SILS, I was looking for opportunities to take classes in other departments, like School of Journalism. I was, finding opportunities to redesign a friend's website for his small business and meticulously document all the decisions that I made along the way, and do little, micro research phases with the family that I lived with, and I think in all of that and in all of the work that I presented from coursework as well, in my portfolio, I also just tried to be very honest about what I saw as the constraints or the limitations, as Jackson said, saying what could have been done to make this better. Said I learned a lot in this process, but I also learned that I really needed a larger sample to feel confident about this. Or, I really learned that I'm not a very good visual designer and I need more practice at this. So, and visual design, and just to say a word about that, we don't hire, and I think most user experience roles in the industry are not hiring for visual design talent, but they are hiring for the ability to visually express yourself, whether it's in diagrams or low fidelity screen designs. So a certain amount of proficiency of putting together sketches and wireframes is necessary, but it is not worth your time to think too much about color and typefaces and all of the cool visual trends that you see on the internet. So it's design skills are something that you probably need to supplement your SILS experience with, but just make sure it's the right kind of design skills and not really aesthetic design.
One last thing I'll add to this is portfolios are important, not just for UX designers, but if you are interested in UX research as a career journey, that is another area they're also looking for portfolios. The upside is when you think of a portfolio as a set of case studies or a set of stories about the work that you've done, you can see that you can just as easily tell a story about research as you can about design. You're just going to be you're kind of focusing on a different part of that project process.
Thank you.
That's a good point. We do have UX researchers who do not do so much design, but really focus on research work.
Yep.
Thanks for mentioning that, Jackson.
I have more questions, but I'm going to wait 30 seconds to see if any students want to jump in first.
Yeah, I'll jump in. First of all, as an aside, it's really cool to hear about the new office in Chattanooga. I'm actually coincidentally wearing a Chattanooga shirt today. My dad lives there. I visit.
I saw that.
A lot. It's a great place, totally. I've been recently applying to a lot of internships, and I've seen a lot of different design agencies through my search. What would you say? What particular thing or group of things would you say distinguishes Viget from other design agencies?
I think that Viget is all about refusing to define ourselves too narrowly to a certain type of work or a certain type of client. There are many agencies that might only work with the government, or only work with nonprofits, or only work with brands, and we kind of do it all. And I really wanted to work at Viget as a new graduate, because I could tell it was a place that was going to give me exposure to lots of different types of work, and it would be a good place to figure out what work I liked the most. And I'm still there because I like doing lots of different types of work. Every few months, I'm learning something new, or I'm shifting into a different kind of mindset. So that is definitely something that comes to mind. I'll let Jackson or Margaret give their own answers.
I think the variety of work is a good one. I like being at an agency. I kind of touched on this earlier, but I'd say the team at Viget is not quite evenly, but reasonably evenly split between technology and design. I love working with developers in-house. We are not just a design or just a creative or just a UX agency. We design and we build. Being close to and collaborating with technologists makes you that much better designer, because you start to understand the constraints as well as the opportunities that technology brings to this. One of the things I appreciate about going to SILS is, going through an information science program, I learned a lot about information retrieval and in structure of information and the organization of information. That made it that much more effective for me to have conversations, technical conversations with our developers around content, around navigation, around search and browse, and just enabled me to have that much more close collaboration.
Thank you. And I actually, could I ask one more question? Is that all right?
Sure.
All right, awesome. This is more geared towards Curt and Jackson, but what skills or particular resources have helped you the most in your progression through the field of user experience, or as a user experience designer?
I would say internships, apprenticeships, direct access to other practitioners have helped me more than anything else. I mean, certainly reading and, reading books and reading blog posts and following people on Twitter is a great source to kind of keep you inspired and interested. But I remember, when I got that internship, like just being in the Slack channel or whatever we had at the time that was the precursor of Slack, and just kind of watching conversations take place, or being pulled into a room to help with brainstorming on something. I kind of observed how people who are paid to do this do it, and that was invaluable to me. So, and that was something I did not do when I was an undergraduate, is like look for opportunities for internships, and I graduated and I was like, okay, what now? But I tried to take that much more seriously during grad school. Everyone called me the man-turn because I was the oldest intern by like a decade. Yeah, that's definitely what I would say is direct exposure to other practitioners.
Plus one to that, the other part was community stuff. I was part of the ASIS chapter when I was at SILS. I got involved with what I guess is now called Triangle UXPA. So being part of community events was really important to make connections that helped me find a internship and then a full-time job after SILS. It also really opened my eyes to the breadth of work that happens in the field, and I really enjoyed getting to know other practitioners with a lot more experience, talking to them about work, hearing about how they're doing work, hearing about the nuances of their career paths and their jobs versus other careers that I could follow. So yeah, I got a lot out of community participation. I know it's kind of a crummy year for that, but thankfully a lot of events are now happening online. Curt just actually did an event with Triangle UXPA. And yeah, I'd also say community stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a sort of a follow-up question to Lori's questions about portfolios and things.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, because I've heard different things, when, making your portfolio, how crucial is it that it's a website, one, and two, how crucial is it that you build that website yourself? Like if you use something like Squarespace, or is it really crucial that you develop that yourself?
Making a website. It's really weird these days when I get a PDF. So making a website, you do not have to build it yourself. If you're trying to pursue roles that are particularly technical, like you might be doing like building stuff, as like you might be part developer, part designer, I could see the argument that they're going to like poke around in the guts of your website and see how good they are. I would much rather you focus on telling a good story, picking the right projects, telling those, those two things. Really, I would rather you spend your time on that than on coding it from scratch. And I, speaking as somebody who built a lot of websites from scratch and then forgot to put any useful information in any of them, don't do that unless you really, really want to, and you feel like you can do all of that, all of the above. Squarespace is fine, Wix, Weebly, the Adobe thing that keeps changing names. Whatever is easy, as long as you can use it to tell that story, that's fine. And frankly, it's going to let you focus on the story and not worry about, did you get all your headers closed?
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say don't build your own website, just because, like Jackson said, unless you are looking for a role that is, more of a maybe like a UI developer that needs those chops. Every time I tried to do that, I just overdid it and ended up with something that was kind of a pain to maintain. And I think that it's perfectly reasonable, and I think so it shows good judgment for a UX designer, which is kind of a non-technical role. I mean, like you need some technical knowledge and you need to work with developers, but like it shows good judgment to say, I'm not going to dump all my energy into developing a website. Like I'm going to choose the best vendor out there that will help me easily do what I need to do, and I'm going to focus on the content. So I would love to see that decision rather than see someone who's, going into the weeds because they're some type of purist or some type of perfectionist, or just, like overachieving in some way that they're not even going to be evaluated on.
Got it. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I know that this group is pro SILS, which is exactly why we had this event. We wanted SILS alums to come speak to current SILS students. But is there anything in addition to just saying, I went through the SILS curriculum, is there anything that resonates with you in evaluating new professionals that that they get it, or that they understand UX UI world?
It doesn't hurt to be familiar with the big thinkers, thought leaders. Not essential, but I don't know. It's helpful. I would say honestly, being able to talk thoughtfully about the work that you've done, whether that's a class project, whether it's a passion project, whether it's something you've done in an internship or an apprenticeship. A lot of our focus is, are you coming into this as a thoughtful practitioner? Do you care about the people that you are designing for? Do you see the value of empathy? Do you understand people and then apply that understanding to problem solving, or not doing those things? I mean, a lot of things that turn us off are people who are overly focused on technology, or overly focused on aesthetics, or overly focused on things that are not connecting technology to people. I think those are pretty important, and there's a lot of ways to express that. Like I said, it can be through your projects and your portfolio pieces. It can be talking about what you've learned from class and showing how that has given you the ability to do good user-centered design or human-centered design, and you understand kind of the pitfalls of that.
Yeah, I think long after they stop calling it user experience, SILS graduates are going to know how to ask the right questions about humans interfacing with technology. And I think that the amount of information is not going to decrease in the world. The amount of software is not going to decrease in the world. there will always be jobs for people who can ask thoughtful questions about context and interaction and empathy. And I think that I just had an apprentice who in Chattanooga that we ended up hiring, and she was a career switcher. She was coming from, she was a counselor, like psychology counselor, and had done some kind of side projects and had gone through a UX boot camp, and kind of was well qualified as an apprentice. And the reasons that we hired her, I think, were, to me, was that she always just asked really good questions. I mean, she didn't have training as a designer. She didn't have training in information science. She didn't have training as a researcher, but she was very thoughtful in seeing the big picture, asking smart questions about it. And I think that's what SILS people are well trained to do. Like, you've taken classes in systems thinking, you've taken classes in how do people seek information, and just, you've done the kind of deep thinking in those types of human information behaviors. And that I think a lot of developers who may have a slam dunk for a high paying job right out of school haven't necessarily done. So I think that, like, I think the challenge with like a SILS grad is figuring out what are the right words do I need to use to express my value in these different roles. But I think that it can be hard, especially when you've just come out of this program, of understanding what it is that makes you different than like a computer science person. But I think just emphasizing the kind of human-centeredness of the education that you've gotten and its proximity to technology, but you're not just a coder, like, that's a valuable role, and that only gets more valuable in your career as you get more senior.
I will also just put in a plug for being at SILS. You have something incredibly valuable, that SILS has grown this focus on the impact of technology on society and people in society. Design ethics is a huge topic in the field now. What are the ethical implications of the work that we are doing? How do you do research in an ethical and inclusive way? These are really hot topics in our field right now. So having practitioners and researchers at SILS who are exclusively focused on the impact of technology on people is incredibly valuable, to see that the work that they're doing and the writing that they're putting out, you have a connection to that most students don't have coming out of design programs, coming out of technology programs.
That's a great point.
It's probably also valuable for us to quickly distinguish between the internships and apprenticeships, since that slide is up here. So our internships are generally structured to be best suited towards current or recent undergrads. It is very kind of training focused. It is one of the kind of key pieces of it is giving undergrads an opportunity to work in cross-functional teams. As an undergrad, you do lots and lots of group projects, but tends to be with other people from your program or people from nearby programs. Very rarely do you get to work with people from very different programs and very different backgrounds. And that's one of the kind of critical components of that internship. The apprenticeship is going to be very valuable for anyone who's a career switcher, who's coming into this after a different career, as well as graduate students, and is much more focused on hands-on practice. So while our interns don't work directly on client work, they can shadow that work, but generally aren't contributing to client projects. Our apprentices are. We are trying to move them into billable client-focused roles as fast as possible, while also providing support and training in the areas of UX that you need to develop to be an effective practitioner.
Unfortunately, applications for the summer internship are closed, but the fall apprenticeship will open up sometime this summer. But it happens every year.
Yes, we do the summer internship each year, and then the apprenticeship is in the fall and kind of the winter, like January to March of each year. So several opportunities.
I think we have time for one or two last questions if there's anything else out there.
Thanks for coming. It's
Yeah.
fun to talk to you all, and I'm glad that you've, I know if you're like us, you're so fatigued of Zoom meetings that it feels like doing one after 5 o'clock is almost unbearable, but it's great that you came and you asked really good questions.
We want to thank you for coming. I know it's been hard to have some of that experience where alums and other employers would drop by Manning Hall, and it's been a year of none of those visits. So we wanted to make time so that students who weren't even part of SILS in the fall of 2018 at least had this opportunity to interact with some professionals in the field. So thank you very much for taking the time to be with us this evening.
Thank you for always keeping the connection open, Lori.
You are welcome, Curt. It's fun to remember when you were I wasn't in SILS in 2005, Jackson. So, but I was when Curt was a student. But I was when Curt was a student. So it's been great to watch his progress, and now starting a new office location. That's great. I'm glad that. Yeah, I'm really excited that you still like the work, right? That's exciting to hear, that it wasn't like, oh, I really shouldn't have entered that program. It's like, oh, this was it.